The federal government today released the details of what it calls its national price on carbon. Who's affected? Here's what you need to know. This will affect 6 jurisdictions: Ontario, New Brunswick, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Yukon, and Nunavut, the ones who have refused to apply a federally approved carbon pricing plan. Ottawa will implement a tax of $20 a ton in those provinces starting in April of 2019 and in the territories as of July 2019. The tax will rise every year by $10, eventually reaching $50 a ton by 2022. In the first year, the tax will boost the price of gas by 4.4 cents a litre, the price of natural gas by 3.9 cents per cubic metre, and the price of propane by 3.1 cents per litre. The government says it wants to offset those costs to consumers, so 90% of its revenue from this tax will be redistributed back to Canadians. The amount you get will depend on where you live and how many people are in your household. The average household payment will range from $256 to $598. How will you be reimbursed? Don't expect a simple check in the mail. The Canada Revenue Agency will manage the payments through annual tax returns. At filing time, people in these affected provinces will have to indicate they're eligible for the so-called Climate Action Incentive Payment. And the rebate will be tacked on to their return, which means if you owe the government money, you may just end up owing less. In Saskatchewan, the federal government estimates the carbon tax will cost the average household $403. But the feds insist the average Saskatchewan household will also get a rebate of $598. Is that enough to win over the provincial government? Joining me now from the provincial legislature in Regina is Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe. Hi, Premier Moe. Great to have you back on the show. Premier, the federal government did exactly what it said.
Thank you so much,
the federal government did exactly what it said it was going to do: impose a carbon pricing or carbon tax plan on your province. So why did you give away the chance to decide what to do with the revenue from that?
Well, actually, we've heard from officials about 5 minutes after the Prime Minister took to the microphone that the federal government has also accepted our plan of prairie resilience, which we commend them for with respect to it is a plan that has actual emissions reductions. What the Prime Minister and what the federal government has indicated they're going to do is they're going to go farther with the most ineffective and most harmful to families portion of the carbon tax plan, and they're going to impose a carbon tax at the gas pumps. They're going to attempt to impose a carbon tax on Saskatchewan families that are heating their homes and heating the recreational centers in our communities across the province. That is what has been implied here this morning. They have acknowledged the effectiveness of the Saskatchewan plan of prairie resilience. Our heavy emitter plan has been accepted, but the federal government has chosen to tax the families across the province.
Why do you say that it's ineffective? How do you know that it's ineffective? And if the money is coming back in the form of a rebate of hundreds of dollars to people living in Saskatchewan, why is that just a tax then?
Well, it's ineffective because it doesn't actually reduce emissions, and nor has it reduced emissions anywhere. And I go back to Premier Wall's comments 2 years ago. If the money is just going back to the people on this ineffective policy, what's the point? Why would you do it in the first place? And the fact of the matter is, if what's indicated today that people would actually receive more money than what they are paying, which we don't accept in this province, as the estimations for people across Canada doesn't fit in with what the family structure is here in this province. But if you are going to receive more money than what you actually pay into this, then we ask, where is that coming from? And it would be coming from a couple of places. One would be from our hockey arenas in our communities across the province paying a tax to Sask Power and Sask Energy, or our schools or our hospitals paying a tax on their heating bills, or it is ultimately coming from businesses that are industries in our province that continue to pay a tax with no real environmental outcomes, just a cost on jobs, a cost on our recreational and healthcare and educational facilities, and ultimately a cost on families when they fuel up at the pumps to move their family across what is a very vast and somewhat underpopulated area of the nation.
On your point, Premier, though, that this tax or this price on carbon won't actually reduce emissions, the science has in many cases backed up the opposite. For example, BC's carbon tax was introduced in 2008, and a study by Duke University and the University of Ottawa concluded that the tax led to a 5 to 10% cut in emissions and that it had a, quote, negligible effect on aggregate economic performance. BC is a resource-dependent economy, much like your own, although different resources. Why wouldn't you expect similar results?
think it's indicated that BC's emissions haven't gone up as much as they otherwise may have. It's been associated with other regulations as well that have been brought in. A tax on itself, as was indicated by most recent reports by the United Nations, would have to be enacted by all countries in the world. It's not going to be in places like the USA, China, or India. And second of all, that tax would have to rise to a point of as possibly as high as $5,500 a ton. That's simply just not going to happen here in the nation of Canada, or I hope it isn't going to happen. You know, nothing changes for Saskatchewan today. We'll continue with our constitutional challenge to protect Saskatchewan families from what is a ineffective environmental policy, a poor economic plan, and we'll continue with that challenge. But we do acknowledge that the federal government has acknowledged and accepted the work that we have put forward with our output-based emissions standards here in the province that will actually have results when it comes to emissions reductions.
Do you agree with the targets that the federal government has set?
Well, the targets that were set by the federal government of 30% in the Paris Accord were agreed to that all provinces, in the Vancouver Declaration, all premiers of the day and provinces thereby agreed that the provinces would work very hard within their jurisdictions to do what they could do to ensure that Canada can achieve their 30% reduction as laid out in the Paris Accord. That is the last time that all provinces have come together with the Prime Minister and the federal government and agreed on anything in this file. It was shortly after that, and the work that came out of that Vancouver Declaration meeting, that we saw myself as an Environment Minister of the day and other Environment Ministers meeting in Montreal, and the Prime Minister of Canada rise in his place at the House of Commons and announce that he would be instituting a carbon tax on all Canadian families.
Yeah, but I guess the point is if the federal government wants to achieve those targets, they say that that's what will get them there. And so if you agree to those targets, do you understand where they're coming from?
Well, we disagree with the method that they're utilizing. We think it's an ineffective method. We have a study
what else could they
out of the University of Regina, understanding the diversity across our nation. And we think that British Columbia should have the provincial authority and autonomy to move forward with a carbon tax if they so choose, and they feel that is an instrument that will be effective for the province of British Columbia. In Saskatchewan, it most certainly won't be, and we have studies out of the University of Regina that show that a carbon tax will actually only reduce emissions about 1%, while impacting our economy here in the province to the tune of many, many billions of dollars over the next 5 years. It's an ineffective tax for our province, and we feel we have the autonomy to move forward with emissions reductions, such as our plan of prairie resilience, which was acknowledged today by the federal government. This is the autonomy the provinces have under the Constitution, and we believe that to be the case here today.
Wasn't that study that you cite, though, done by the U of R, commissioned and paid for by your government, and isn't it as of yet not peer-reviewed? We'll talk to the peer reviewing of that particular study, but the fact of the matter is that study was done in conjunction with our Ministry of Environment and others at the University of Regina, which is a very reputable organization, I might put forward, and it's a study that looked at Saskatchewan, the impact of a carbon tax as it would be implied on our province specifically. With respect to other studies that I noted before as well, the IPCC study that was put forward, the parameters that study is framed around simply aren't going to be met either. We aren't going to go to a $5,500 carbon tax, nor are all the countries in the nation going to impose a carbon tax on their respective people. So we need to keep in mind what is fact-based and what is actually achievable here in our nation. That is the approach we have taken in Saskatchewan with our plan of prairie resilience. That has been acknowledged as an effective plan by the federal government here today. And what we are asking is that the federal government back off on their implication of attempted imposition of a carbon tax on Saskatchewan families, at least until the courts have their opportunity to decide here in this province and in Ontario. That's the route they took. They respected the courts in the case of TMX. They should respect them here. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Premier Moe.
Thank you, Bessie.